Alright, I am back with another video, and today we have the start of the Patron Build series. Similar to the previous community build series that we've done, which was the deity builds, we're going to be building a new character each week based on a patron of warlocks, or at least kind of loosely based on a patron of warlocks in a sense, because for this series, unlike for deity builds where we always had to take a dip of cleric because of the the dialogue options you would get, we don't actually need to take a dip of warlock with each of these builds, giving us a bit more freedom. So while this is based on potential warlock patrons, we don't have to play a warlock, and that is especially true with today's case, Vecna, one of the most popular D&D characters of all time, even going as far as to have a character named and based on him, in Stranger Things, a critically acclaimed series, as well as even being represented in other media such as Dead by Daylight, where he was voiced by Matt Mercer. And honestly, he's a really interesting character, this evil wizard who decided to become a lich and eventually ascended to the power of the gods before he was eventually cast down. And honestly, it was kind of interesting to come up with the lore for a reason that there would even be a chosen of Vecna in the first place, because as far as we're concerned, during the events of BG3, Vecna just isn't around. So why would he be? Well, we came up with this lore idea that after Vecna was destroyed at the hands of the other gods, perhaps his essence, his immortal spirit, still lived on, ever searching for a way to return, because his spirit is bound to the realm by two things: his eye and hand. The eye and hand of Vecna are two amazingly popular D&D items. They are high-level artifacts which give those who attune to them incredible power, but also slowly corrupting them. And it's interesting to have these two mega popular items that we can pull mechanical reference from for making this build. So I like to think of this build as someone who is unconsciously slowly being starting to be, oh my goodness, I can't speak today, slowly starting to be taken over by Vecna's will, his spirit, because they've somehow managed to stumble across the eye or the hand, or both. And by the time that this build is finished, we will have as many of the abilities from the eye and hand combined as possible, slowly becoming closer and closer to Vecna himself, before eventually we are taken over by him. But again, why us? And it's one simple reason: the absolute. Not only have maybe by some intervention through Vecna's spirit himself come into contact with his artifacts, we're also dead center in the plot of the absolute, which has the potential to be a world-dominating force. Vecna not only seeks to regain a new body in the form of this chosen, in quotations, but to actually usurp the absolute, take control of the Netherbrain, and make his grand return through a new display of power, a new power, something that the world has not yet seen: the Netherbrain and the absolute cult. Imagine Vecna lording over a legion of mind flayers. That is a terrifying thought, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of see the progression of this character reflect their slow descent into being controlled by Vecna through the spells that they would eventually get. So yeah, that's kind of the lore thing, and again, the kind of goals for this build are going to be to get as many abilities from the hand and eye as possible. And I will say this right off the bat, obviously the hand and eye are much higher on the power scaling level than this game would allow, but we can get a lot of the spells provided by these artifacts, as well as some of their abilities, to either lesser or limited degree, which will pretty much satisfy the needs of the build. Again, if we were going to level 20 in an actual campaign, then you'd get all the abilities, but obviously we're limited to level 12 here, which is a lower power scaling, but still, it will work for our purposes. So, without further ado, let's get in to the build. For kicking things off, we are actually going to start as a cleric, which may seem like an odd choice, but of course we wanted to play with Death Domain. Again, it's the new toy, but it also does fit Vecna's ability set really well, because we want to be able to do big necrotic damage on our attacks and kind of basically make a necromancer type build, because again, we're basically going to be a lich by the time we're done with this build. Death Domain is going to give us a ton of stuff to work with, like our new feature, our domain spells, and such like that. For the Death Domain, we also are going to get to pick up a couple of cantrips at level 1. We can grab Toll the Dead, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy for now. Obviously, Guidance and Thaumaturgy are great, and Toll the Dead is a great starting spell for necrotic damage. With the Death Domain, we're going to be able to pick up the Bone Chill cantrip, gaining access to martial weapon proficiency as well, if we so need it, 2 new domain spells being False Life and Ray of Sickness, both of which fit the build, and the Reaper feature, allowing our Necromancy cantrips that target only 1 creature to target 2 instead. As I said, we are also going to be able to select a cantrip from a special spell list. I've gone with Bone Chill, but Bursting Sinew is also there. But now, of course, we come to the deity choice, which is a bit tricky, because obviously we can't select Vecna as a deity, so this is going to be a bit weird for roleplay, right? Wrong. What if Vecna's way of influencing this individual isn't just to directly control them, but to mess with their mind? I believe this person would start off as a cleric of Kelemvor, who is a deity of death, and as such he's usually going around performing the last rites of people, stomping out undead, but then as he kind of accidentally, maybe he's in an undead crypt dealing with some undead, he accidentally stumbles across the eye or hand or something like that, and is slowly starting to become corrupted. In his mind, he thinks he's serving Kelemvor, but in actuality, he's serving Vecna, which I think is kind of a nice, kind of nasty twist on a kind of cleric in a way. But anyways, moving on to our ability scores, and I'm just going to say this right off the bat, this build does need some stat boosting items to make it work overall, as you can tell probably by the stat spread that we have here. So, let's talk about it. Strength is at 8, but of course the hand is supposed to give us at least 20 strength. So I had the idea that if this character, who is a low-level character all things considered, suddenly got their hands on a big, powerful artifact like the Hand of Vecna, that would take an incredible toll on their body. So, they are going to need to, throughout the course of their playthrough, down Hill Giant Potions and eventually Cloud Giant Potions to keep up the necessary strength to stop their body from combusting under the weight of the power, feeling that it's some sort of divine intervention. So, in the end, it gives us a way of getting this high level of strength, which is going to make this build a lot stronger, but also giving you a side objective to try and keep your body under control. I love side questing in builds. So yeah, that's kind of how we're going to do the strength. I know it's kind of the boring, easy way out, but I think the lore justification for it does make sense. Dexterity is at 14. I would like this higher, but this is about as high as we need it for the build overall, because there is a version of this build that can use medium armor if you want, but by the time this build is done, even with a 14 in dexterity with the armor and equipment and abilities that we choose, you're going to have a range of 20 to 22 AC even without armor, and with armor you can have up to 25 AC, so we're going to be pretty defensive even with a lower dexterity. And you may also be thinking about the initiative order and such like that. Don't worry, I have ways of patching that up as well. Constitution is at 8 because we are going to be using the Amulet of Greater Health, and I actually think in this build you can justify it with a lore reason. Vecna was all about seeking out artifacts of great magical power to ascend to his godhood, and I feel like a Chosen of Vecna would do the same thing, taking advantage of as many powerful artifacts as they can get their hands on, including the Amulet of Greater Health, which would set our Constitution to 23 and give us advantage on Constitution saving throws for maintaining concentration on our spells. So overall, we would have a very high strength and constitution score, which makes sense for someone attuned to the Hand and Eye of Vecna, at least in my opinion. So, but I would say that at the start of the game, you're going to want to swap your intelligence and constitution scores, because in the early game, we will use the Warped Headband of Intellect to set our intelligence to 17, so you can put those points into constitution instead. But once you respec after obtaining the amulet, you'll put a 16 into intelligence, because obviously, we're going to be using Necromancer Wizard in this build, and we're going to need to learn some of our spells from spell scrolls. Again, another side quest that we can do to gain some of the higher 6th level spells like Disintegrate and Eyebite and such. We're going to need to learn them from scrolls, which is again another thing that I feel like someone who is a Chosen of Vecna would do, seeking knowledge to become more powerful. Wisdom is going to be at 16, so obviously we are a cleric, we're going to need it for our spellcasting stuff, and of course we can put our charisma to 12, because all of our other stats are accounted for. We might as well have a bit of charisma, especially if we are going to be the kind of main character of the party. We do want a little bit of that. This plus our thaumaturgy will make us good at intimidation checks, and if we go over to our skill proficiencies, we can grab persuasion as well from cleric. I decided to play as a human today, because Vecna himself was also once a human, as well as the fact that it would allow us to choose Perception at level 1 for a skill proficiency. For someone with the Eye of Vecna, it makes sense to have high Perception. This plus our high wisdom means we'll be very good at perception checks, and by the time this build is done, we'll even have advantage on them. So I think we've got that part nailed already. We are an acolyte to start, because I felt like that made sense for the lore of the character before they got, they're into Vecna's control. So we've got religion and insight. And finally, I decided to go with history for our last skill proficiency. Right, that was a lot to talk about at level 1, but of course I'll be discussing more about the abilities of the hand and eye and how we translate them into this build as the video goes on. At level 2, we're going to straight away multi-class into Wizard. This is going to allow us to take advantage of our spell scrolls right away, and again, if you have that warped headband of intellect, you won't have to worry about your intelligence score that much. We're going to be able to grab 3 cantrips here in case, and no surprise to anyone, I'm going to be grabbing Booming Blade, because it is going to help us out, because we will be making melee attacks with this build in order to take advantage of some of our Cleric features. We can also grab Mage Hand, as well as a different spell here if you like. I like grabbing Friends, because again, if we're going to be the face of the party, it makes sense to gain advantage on Charisma checks. We're also going to be able to pick up a bunch of spells from level 1 here. Obviously, we want Mage Armor if you're going down the clothing route, but you don't need it if you're going down the armor route. Again, I'll explain that more in the equipment section. But for now, we'll grab Shield, because obviously we want it. We'll grab Ice Knife because it's a cold damage attack, and the Hand of Vecna does make cold damage attacks. We can also grab some of the basic utility spells like Longstrider and Hand Sleep, as well as Featherfall. That's a pretty solid option, pretty solid group of options at level 1. But also, as you can see here, I have also learned a few spells from some scrolls, so I'll discuss all of them with you now, just while we're here. So in addition to the level 1 spells we just selected, I also have Misty Step for, again, a minor version of Teleport, because the Hand of Vecna gives you access to the Teleport spell. Obviously, we can't use the full Teleport spell in this game, but obviously we can use things like Misty Step and Dimension Door to gain the same effect. Another spell that the Hand and Eye provides is Slow, so we grab that here, Dimension Door for the aforementioned reason, as well as at level 5 we can also pick up Curriculum of Strategy, Artistry of War for a bigger version of Magic Missile, as well as the Throne for a big necrotic damage attack. I think it's worth learning both of these, even if neither of them are really part of the Hand and Eye's kind of repertoire, although Dethrone can be flavoured as the big necrotic damage attack that the Hand and Eye grant together, which is kind of it's its own unique thing that's not really a spell. Both Eye Bite and Disintegrate are part of the Hand and Eye's spell list, so we definitely want to make sure we pick those up, and Circle of Death is another big necrotic damage spell that you can grab. So overall, that's pretty much everything you want to get from spell scrolls. A lot of higher level spells here, but also some mid-level ones as well to be able to search throughout the game. Alright, let's move on. At Wizard level 2, we are going to get to choose our subclass, and of course we're going to be going with Necromancy for the Grim Harvest feature. Once per turn, if we kill a creature with a spell, we can regain hit points equal to twice of the spell slot level used, thrice if it's a Necromancy spell, with undead and constructs being unaffected. So obviously for us, this kind of plays into another ability of the Eye and Hand, which is at the start of every turn, you regain hit points. Obviously, this helps with that, as well as the ability to use some equipment later, which can also help with that. So this build is going to have a lot of self-healing. We also do get to pick up a couple more spells, and we can grab something like Magic Missile, because it is the basic wizard spell, so it feels like it fits the build, and something else, totally to your preference. I would like to think that later on in the campaign, if we're starting to look more and more Lich-like, especially if maybe we decide to take on some Illithid powers, wink wink nudge nudge, we definitely want Disguise Self, so that people don't realise, we're basically an undead man walking around. So yeah, let's move on. Now, at this point, I will quickly discuss something. We could go to level 3 of Wizard and pick up another important ability for the Eye, which is See Invisibility. However, we don't actually need the See Invisibility spell, because of course, in this playthrough, you're going to be getting Volo's Eye. Now, picture this. Someone brought this up on the livestream where we created this build, and honestly, it was such a genius idea. So, imagine Volo completely unintentionally thinks he has this normal Urdzat's eye, but it's actually the Eye of Vecna, and he just inserts it into you without thinking. Maybe that could be, maybe our character finds the hand in a crypt and gets the eye from Volo unintentionally. Like, imagine Vecna kind of, like, disguising the eye. Like, dude, That is the most Volo thing on the planet, I think, which is absolutely hilarious. So yes, we're obviously going to be having the stand-in for the actual Eye of Vecna in this build be Volo's Stats Eye, which will give us permanent See Invisibility, which obviously fits the kind of flavour of getting true sight from the eye. But from now, we're going to actually go back to Cleric because I want more of the Cleric abilities. First up, we're going to be able to gain Channel Divinity, Touch of Death. Whenever we hit a creature with a melee attack, we can use our Channel Divinity to deal extra necrotic damage. Because of our high strength that we're going to have from consuming giant potions, we're going to be able to hit people really goddamn hard with a weapon of our choosing. And believe it or not, this build does use weapons, especially once you get into the late game. So this is going to feel like a pretty potent feature that is going to feel like we're punching someone in the face with the full force of the Hand of Vecna to really deal some damage. We're also going to get to pick our Cleric spells, and we have quite a few options. Sanctuary I always like to grab just because it is a powerful option, just being able to say, actually, no, you cannot attack me. We're also going to get Inflict Wounds because it's a big necrotic damage attack. Bane, because it just feels like it fits the build. Command, for the same reason. And your final spell could be whatever you like. I like grabbing Shield of Faith, because if you don't have anything else you really want to concentrate on, a +2 to your armor class won't hurt. Moving on to Cleric level 3, we're going to gain access to Blindness and Ray of Enfeeblement from our Cleric spell list for Death, which I think is quite nice. We're also going to be able to pick up a couple more spells, and it's entirely up to you kind of what you want to grab here, but for level 2 options, I do like Aid to give us in the party more HP, as well as grabbing Protection from Poison, because when you have the Hand of Vecna, you're actually immune to poison and disease. Of course, we can't get immunity to poison with this build, so resistance to poison is the next best thing. Next up, we get to we need to grab another cantrip, so we're going to grab Bursting Sinew, because again, feels like it fits the build, as well as we can grab another level 2 spell, we can grab Hold Person. We're also going to grab a Feat, and at this point, I recommend just bumping up your Wisdom, since we're mostly focusing on the Cleric stuff for now, and at this point, you will still have a 17 in Intelligence if you're playing with the Warped Headband, which is more than fine for now. Now, I would say at this point, let's actually jump back over to Wizard. I know, the leveling is a bit all over the place here, but trust me, it will make sense. Level 2 of Wizard is going to give us access to more level 2 spells, including Crown of Madness, which is another requirement for the Hand and Eye spell list, so we do want to pick this up at some point. Now, if you didn't use a scroll to grab it, you could actually grab Misty Step here as well to fulfill that requirement, but I ended up grabbing it from a scroll, so, you know, that does free up another spell for us to pick up here. And again, it's kind of up to you what you want to grab here. We do have most of the level 2 options that we want already, so it's kind of whatever. I do like Darkness here because part of the Eye's abilities is that you are immune to being blinded, and we are going to get blindness immunity in this build, so Darkness would actually be a very powerful spell for us here, so we can pick it up. And then now at Wizard level 4, we are going to get to choose another cantrip. It's entirely up to you what you want to grab here. I like picking up either Poison or Acid Spray, or Acid Splash or Poison Spray, so it's entirely up to you if you want to grab one of those. I think Poison Spray fits the build quite nicely. We also did get to choose some more level 2 spells here from Wizard. I kind of like Detect Thoughts, even though it's not actually an ability of the Hand of Vecna to read people's minds. Having such a high perception that we can read people's tells is basically kind of like having a minor version of mind reading, and again, we could also flavor it as the influence of the tadpole, also helping us out there. And also, I don't know if there's anything else we could really pick up here that would feel immediately on theme for the build, so it's entirely up to you what you want to grab here. Mirror Image is always good, Mel's Acid Arrow is a nice damaging spell. You know, you've got a lot of options here, so it's kind of a pick your favourite situation. I'll grab Mirror Image because it is quite a good spell for defense. Right, we also do get to choose another feat at this point, and this one may seem a bit weird, but we're actually going to be picking up Dual Wielder in this build, because we're going to be dual wielding a staff and a dagger. We're going to get a bunch of benefits from doing so that I'll explain more about in the equipment section, but in addition to this, Vecna is portrayed with having an arcane dagger quite a lot, so we knew we wanted to get a dagger and a staff involved in this build somehow, and with dual wielding, we're going to gain a bonus to our armor class, which is nice, and be able to give us the ability to dual wield a staff and dagger just in general, because normally you can't. So overall, it's more of a flavor choice. You could grab Alert instead if you don't care about having an offhand dagger, because obviously that can help with a lot of things that make sense for the eye, but otherwise we are going to be going with dual wielder today. Moving on to our, we're going to go back to Cleric now, and we're kind of done with the wizard levels. We've got everything we need from there. We're going to put the rest of our points into Cleric to get the higher level Death Cleric features, and again, we will, because we're multi-classing to full spellcasters, as long as we have the spell scrolls, we can still get the level 6 spells for wizard. So, at this point we're going to get Destroy Undead, which is kind of counterintuitive to the build, so we're just not going to use that. And for our domain spells, we're going to get Animate Dead as well as Vampiric Touch. Both make a ton of sense for the build. We're now really starting to lean into Vecna's influence, meaning that we've gone from destroying the undead to resurrecting them to fight for our cause, as well as Vampiric Touch, which literally lets us do a big bout of necrotic damage with our touch that allows us to heal HP. If that's not a literal Hand of Vecna spell, I don't know what is. We're also going to have to redo my whole spell list, because again, this is still a thing, but now we get to choose from level 3 spells. And of course, we're grabbing Spirit Guardians, because having a necrotic aura around us just makes too much sense. We can also grab Speak with Dead, because I feel like that's also relevant, as well as Bestow Curse, because I feel like it does fit the build. We'll re-grab Aid and Hold Person, as well as all of the other spells that we selected earlier in the build. Moving on to Cleric level 6, we're going to get Inescapable Destruction. Spells you cast ignore resistance to necrotic damage. I mean, of course, we're now the avatar of one of the most powerful demigods ever to exist. That was a lich, so of course we don't care about your necrotic resistance. Of course this doesn't overcome necrotic immunity, unfortunately, but hey, it is what it is. We're also going to get another use of our Channel Divinity at this level, which is also nice for being able to do our big necrotic damage. We do get to select another spell at this point, so just make sure that you have everything that we selected. At Cleric level 7, we get access to level 4 spells, including Death Ward, which obviously fits to the build. We are the Lord of Undeath, we're not really supposed to die. As well as Blight, another big necrotic damage attack, which we absolutely want. And of course, now we do get to choose level 4 spells to prepare, and I do quite like Banishment here, as well as Freedom of Movement, because I do feel like these two spells, obviously Freedom of Movement, we're immune to stun, difficult terrain cannot slow us down, and we cannot be magically paralyzed or restrained. Definitely feels like something that an Avatar of Vecna would have, as well as Banishment, kind of like a minor version of Disintegrate for us when we're not actually outright destroying them, we're just getting rid of them for a bit. But of course, we do get the full Disintegrate a bit later. And then finally, as a capstone for the build, we get to go for Cleric level 8, in which we will have Divine Strike Necrotic, allowing us to add even more necrotic damage to our attacks, which is nice. We're also going to be able to prepare another spell at this point, and honestly, we kind of have everything that I would have wanted, so Enhance Ability is just a nice overall buff. And finally, for our feat, at this point, you've definitely got your hands on the Amulet of Greater Health and of respect to the stats you see here, so at this point, you're going to bump up your Intelligence to an 18 for a nice rounded stat spread. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a hell of a lot of necromantic power. You're going to be able to employ some of the most powerful spells in the game, thanks to spell scrolls as a wizard, allowing you to do exactly that. As I said, you're going to get some of the most powerful spells in the game that all fit the Hand and Eye of Vecna. You're going to have Disintegrate, Eye Bite, Artistry of War, Dimension Door, Slow, Crown of Madness, Misty Step, and Shield and others such. I'm going to quickly drop that for Mage Armour right now, though, because again, I'll show off the unarmored defense in a moment. But you're also going to gain access to powerful necrotic damage melee attacks. You're going to have a wide arsenal of powerful equipment, and as well, when we look at the stats, as you can see, our stat spread is pretty goddamn solid. A maximum of 27 in Strength, a 14 in Dex, a 23 in Constitution, an 18 in both Intelligence and Wisdom, and a 12 in Charisma, meaning that we're going to have pretty goddamn decent saving throws in all of these categories, which again is another thing that the Hand and Eye provides. Really good saving throws. And of course, you'll have a plethora of equipment to choose from to build your own version of the demigod Lich and his avatar. So overall, we've got a really, really solid kit here. We've got big necrotic damage, cold damage, the ability to use spellcasting and melee intertwined. We've got the powers of a cleric and a wizard to just give us a ton of power. So let's discuss the actual equipment here and what it does for us. First up, we have the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, which does an additional 1d4 necrotic damage on a hit, which of course, thanks to our ability, is going to ignore resistance, which is great. And creatures will have disadvantage on saving throws against our necromancy spells, meaning that yeah, our attacks are going to be pretty goddamn powerful. In addition, whenever the wielder kills a hostile creature with a spell, they greedily absorb its energy and gain life essence until their next long rest. Life essence means that you can cast necromancy spells without consuming a spell slot. That's very powerful. It's also a +2 staff on its own, so when we bonk people on the head with the staff of Vecna's, with the Hand of Vecna's power, that's going to be dealing 1d6 for us, +10, plus 1d4 necrotic, plus our divine strike, plus our channel divinity ability. We can do basically necrotic divine smites with this build, which is kind of awesome. In addition to that, we're also going to be offhand wielding the Cold Snap thanks to Dual Wielder. This is going to give us a +1 to our armor class, a way of dealing 1d4 cold damage with an offhand attack, so a cold damage attack in a minor way, as well as giving us the ability to use Chilling Counter. Whenever a creature misses us with an attack, they must succeed a DC 13 Constitution saving throw, or be chilled for 2 turns. Shield makes the entity vulnerable to cold damage, so if an enemy misses us and they fail that con save, which I guess in the late game is not going to be overly common, they do suddenly become vulnerable to cold damage, which means any of our cold damage options will do a ton more damage, and again it gives us a +1 to our armor class as well. Thanks to Dual Wielder, that's an overall +2 just for having the dagger in our offhand, so it's the same as a shield. And in addition to that, if we quickly equip Mage Armour, boom, turn the character back around please, there we go, and as you can see here, boom diada, a solid 20 AC, which feels very, very nice. Also, for our ranged weapon, we have the Hell Rider Longbow. Just for having this equipped, we're going to gain a +3 bonus to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks. Well, there you go. That's another huge ability of the Eye of Vecna right away without needing to have a high initiative roll. We're also going to gain access to, we're also for our early game, I should say, my apologies. For the early game, you're going to use Creation's Echo, a staff that allows you to, if the wielder deals Acid, Fire, Lightning, Radiant, or Necrotic damage, you become resistant to that damage type for 2 turns. I would say that if you're not even too into having the idea of the cold snapping your offhand, you could dual wield Creation's Echo with the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, and every time you cast a Necromancy spell, you will become resistant to necrotic damage, which can also be quite fitting. But obviously we wanted to go with the dagger because of the theming and all that, but Creation's Echo regardless is a great early game option for you. There's even an early game option for the bow as well, called the Bow of Awareness, which will give you a +1 bonus to initiative rolls, so you can have that in the early game, then switch to the better Hell Rider Longbow in the late game. Of course, now we move on to our headpiece, which for this variation of the build is the Hood of the Weave, giving you a +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. This is for the unarmored version of the build that is more geared towards our spell save DC, whereas for the armored version, which I'll discuss in a minute, we go for something a little bit different. But for now, this is a pretty good option. Of course, in the early game though, you are going to be using the Warped Headband of Intellect, which sets our intelligence score to 17 as previously described. If you don't want to have to search for this spell scroll as well, you can grab the Nymph Cloak for Dominate Person, once per, I believe it's Long Rest, yes. So this would give us another way of grabbing one of the Hand and Eyes abilities, but of course you can also find this as a spell scroll, which could free up your cloak slot for something else. For the armor, we have gone for the Robe of the Weave, giving us a +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, a +2 to our armor class, and whenever we succeed a saving throw against a spell, we regain hit points. So again, even more regeneration. I'll quickly take a moment now to explain the armored version of this build. For the armored version of this build, you have a couple of options for your armor, as well as something that I recommend for the early game. My early game recommendation is the Dark Justicia Half Plate, giving you advantage on Constitution saving throw checks, and honestly, looking kind of cool for like an armored mage type build in my personal opinion. But of course, if you want to stick with the armored variation of this build and you decide to go full evil, you can go ahead and just axe the Night Song with Shadowheart to gain the Dark Justicia Half Plate's very rare version, giving you similar abilities, but while you have Shield of Faith equipped, which this equipment does give you a specialized version of, it reduces all incoming damage by 2 and reflects any damage received back at the attacker who takes necrotic damage. So people will take necrotic damage just for hitting you with melee attacks, which feels very fitting. I tested both the clothing and the armor versions of this build, and they felt pretty interesting. Obviously with the armor, you get a much higher overall AC, especially if you swap your headpiece to the Helm of Baldur. The Helm of Baldur will give you 2 hit points of healing at the beginning of every turn, obviously fitting that requirement for the Hand and Eye. You gain a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws, which is awesome. You cannot be stunned, and you're immune to critical hits. Again, another powerful artifact that Avatar of Vecna would seek out. But of course, obviously people might not want to wield the like Sharon armor because if they feel like it doesn't fit the build, in which case you can kind of cover it up with like the absolute cap clothing, which I think looks quite good in my opinion. But up to you if you want to kind of go down that route. There's two different variations of this build. My personal preference though is actually the armored version. I think it fits the overall vibe of the build more and gives you a lot to work with. Moving on to our gloves, we have two options. Either the Daredevil gloves, giving you a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, and making your ranged spell attacks made as melee spell attacks, so you don't have to, you know, move around and disengage just to not have disadvantage on your ranged attacks, which for this build is very nice. Or if you plan on going for a more summoning undead focus, you can go for the Abyss Beckoners, giving them resistance to all damage except psychic damage, but giving them the possibility of becoming mad, meaning they may attack you or anyone nearby. I would say either of these are good, depending on what kind of overall theme you're going for, but the Daredevil gloves I found to be the best for kind of making this build feel a little bit better overall to play. I found that like if I wanted to run in and bonk someone with my stick and then have to, you know, back out to be able to cast a big ranged attack, it felt a bit awkward, so the Daredevil gloves really do help with that. And finally, there wasn't really any boots that I felt like fit this build, so you've got two options. Either the evasive shoes for just another flat bonus to your armor class, which I definitely recommend for the clothing version of this build, or the boots of striding to prevent you from being knocked prone while concentrating, which can help with those concentration saving throws. Entirely up to you, but obviously this one only works with the armored version. For our accessories, obviously in the end game you have the Amulet of Greater Health, setting your Constitution score to 23 and giving you advantage on Constitution saving throw checks. In the early game though, even though I forgot to get it here, I would recommend the Pairing Active Wound Closure, so that every time you are healed, you always heal the maximum amount of hit points and you are immediately stabilized when you are downed. Definitely seems fitting for a build like this. For your rings, you have a lot of options available to you here. You've got the Eversight ring, which I recommend having equipped at all times because it makes you immune to being blinded, which for the purposes of this build is kind of a necessity, as well as you can grab the Ring of Regeneration to heal you for 1d4 hit points at the start of every turn, again, filling that requirement. And I'll remind you, if you have equipment that has passive healing on it, like the Ring of Regeneration or the Helm of Baldur, if you are healed at the start of every turn, if you're downed, you just get back up. So you're literally undying. So obviously that fits the build. But some other fun ring options can include After Death Do Us Part, making it so that when you're downed, you rise once more with half of your hit points restored. And again, you're supposed to go mad with Shadow Possession, but that still doesn't happen. So it's basically just a free revive with half your HP. Definitely fitting for this build. The Snowburst ring, so that whenever you deal cold damage, you create icy surfaces beneath your opponent that they could potentially slip up on. The Ring of Exalted Marrow, giving you the ability to cast Command on Undead, or deal a necrotic damage melee attack that could possibly paralyze a target. And finally, another obvious choice, that's the Killer's Sweetheart. That's meant to be the Crypt Lord Ring. My apologies, they have the same icon, but the Crypt Lord Ring will allow you to create Undead, which is a level 6 Necromancy spell, summoning a powerful Mummy Lord to your side. I would actually recommend that you actually have that ring, cast the Mummy Lord spell, and then once the Mummy Lord is done with, swap to another ring. But yes, overall, everything in this build, I believe, was either coloured in the black and jade green dye, I think that's more for the clothing version, and the black and azure dye for the armoured version. So feel free to kind of play around with the colours here, but these were the main two that I used. Also, don't forget to pick up your elixirs of Hill Giant Strength to set your strength to 21 in the early game, and in the late game, the elixir of Cloud Giant Strength to set your strength to 27. But yeah, overall, that is the build, and I think we pretty much nailed the concept here. We got pretty much all of the abilities from the Hand and Eye of Vecna. We got every single spell that we could get, and anything that we couldn't, we got substitutes for. For example, you'd normally be able to get Finger of Death, which is a level 7 spell, which obviously we don't have access to here, but things like Blight, Dethrone, and all that obviously fit that bill. You even get things like Danger Sense, obviously we have advantage on all sorts of things like that, and you could grab the Alert Feat if you don't want to go with Dual Wielder. We also have like the Poison Resistance, the Regeneration. Obviously we didn't grab Wish, because yes, having the Hand and Eye of Vecna does grant you the Wish spell. Obviously, we couldn't get that, unfortunately, but hey, we had to make some concessions here. You also get things like, we couldn't get Clairvoyance, but obviously we don't need Clairvoyance, but we got all the other spells like Crown of Madness, Disintegrate, Dominate Monster, and Eye Bite. Well, we can't get Dominate Monster, but we got Dominate Person instead. And yeah, we got, the Enhanced Strength, the closest thing we could get to True Sight. We managed to get pretty much everything. The Eye technically also has, like, X-Ray Vision, but honestly, how were we ever going to get that? Again, See Invisibility is the closest thing we're really going to get to that, but unless you can think of something else, let me know. But yeah, we pretty much got everything from the Hand and Eye of Vecna, with a cool lore-based build of a character who thinks they're doing good under the, you know, grace of their deity, Kelemvor, eventually turning dark and sinister because of the influence of Vecna unwillingly taking control of them, before Vecna himself just basically inserts themselves into his body, into this character's body, and just become the new Vecna. They literally become the avatar of Vecna, taking over the absolute and ruling over the world. Like, it's honestly a really interesting concept. Now, a lot of people would probably think, hey, you know, maybe you should make this build with, like, the Dark Urge or something, but then I think that makes you too closely tied to Ball. Yes, obviously you'd have the thing of, like, oh, look, the character has got a conflicting, uncontrollable thing that they can't really do anything about, but really, that makes you too connected to the inherent narrative, and then, like, once you actually get to the Ball list stuff, you're like, well, now this kind of has broken the fantasy a bit, because now it's not Vecna, it's Bull. So I actually feel like playing this as the Dark Urge is kind of counterintuitive. Oh, and the one thing I will quickly mention is actually I would take advantage of Illithid powers with this build. They're not required for the build, but I definitely like the ability to grab Fly, and I actually do think the visual representation of seeing the tadpole have more influence and giving you like this like necrotic look over your eyes does actually fit the build as you get into it later. So the main thing I would want is the flying speed from that, but you could also pick up things like Black Hole and any of like things like Illithid expertise, which would feel great, Luck of the Far Realms, Favorable Beginnings, and Psionic Backlash and Dominance. All of those will feel pretty damn good on this build. And like I say, you're going to be able to do massive amounts of damage with this build. You're going to be incredibly tanky because you're going to have a massive pool of HP and extremely high AC. You're going to be able to do things in both melee with things like Booming Blade, also applying the necrotic damage from our weapons and our, you know, Channel Divinity and such like that. And again, you just have all of these things synergizing. Like, I think this may be the best Necromancer build I've made. Easy peasy. Like, if you want to make that kind of vibe, I think we've done it. And I think being able to use basically all of the abilities from the Hand and Eye of Vecna as well is great. Now, I know what people are going to be saying, this build is way more power buildy than most of the builds I make, but I think in this case, it makes sense. It's bloody Vecna. How could we not power build in this case? But yeah, that is going to do it for me today. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Patron Build series, and I think the Patron Build series is going to be like every kind of start of the week, so Monday or Tuesday, because then I can make the video on the weekend, which gives me more time to make sure I've got all my research and everything in order before I actually start talking on the mic. But yeah, so stay tuned to the next episode of the Patron Build series, where we're going to be tackling another extremely popular patron, the Raven Queen. And I'll be honest, you all know what that's gonna happen with that one. Alright, that's gonna do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.